And this is the workshop for the July 25th TeamsCode Summer 2020 online contest. So this is a short preparation for the contest, and it'll get you ready for all the logistical information that you need to know. So now is time for a sample problem. And if you guys want to follow along on your own computers, the URL for this is tinyurl.com/tc sample problem. So I'll give you a moment to type that in, and then we'll get started.
Sean will also be screen sharing the problem. So if you don't have to type in the link if you want, and you can just view our shared slideshow.
Yeah. So just to show that the link works.
Link in chat.
Yeah, can you help to put the link in chat so we can just click together?
Yeah, so as questions arise when we go through the problem, feel free to just type questions into the chat publicly, and then we'll be sure to get back to them later during the Q&A session at the end of this. So before the Q&A though, we want to first go over a sample problem. And this is a problem called board game. In our 2019 fall contest, this was an easy number 4. So we're going to go through this problem. So first of all, let's start with a description. So you're playing a certain board game where the location on the board that you move depends on your current location. So for instance, if you're on the first space and that space contains a 5, then you would move to the 5th space in the next move. And this continues on until you hit the space containing 0, which ends the game. In this problem, you start on the first space, and your job is to determine how many moves it takes to reach the space containing a 0. So now Connor's going to briefly go through the input, output, and then we'll have some sample inputs and outputs to help you with the problem.
Okay, so the input part basically tells you what the format is, how your code is going to take in the input. So for this specific problem, the first line contains an integer n, which is the total number of spaces for the board. And then the second line will contain n total numbers, and each number on that defines a space on the board. The finish line is represented by a 0. The next part contains the output format, which is how we want you to print out to the console. So you need to print the number of moves that it takes to reach the finish. And you don't want to count the move that it takes to get onto the initial space. If it's not possible to reach the finish, then print out the number -1. So here's a sample input and output to help you get started and to be able to test your code. So as a sample input, let's say there are 10 spaces on the board and they are arranged like this: 2, 7, 5, 8, 0, 6, 3, 4, 2, 9. Now the sample output for this problem, this sample input would be 4, because you would go, so once you land on this first space 2, it would take you to the second one, which would take you to the 7th, which would take you to the 3rd, which would take you to the 5th, which lands you on the finish. And that was a total of 4 moves. So that's how this problem would work.
You're muted.
Okay, so the first thing that we want to do in this problem is we want to read in the input and then figure out what sort of data we want to use to store the input. So let's look at the input section. The first line contains an integer n, the number of spaces. The second line contains n integers, which defines the board. So in this problem, we're actually going to be using Java, because the most common language in this contest is actually Java. So we're going to be solving this problem in Java. If you use another language, it's okay. Just try to follow along and think of how you would solve it in your own language. But this is really more like just to think about the algorithm as a whole. So the very first thing that we're going to do is read in the sample input. And in order to do so, we first have to create a scanner. So we're going to import java.util.star, which basically imports everything in Java utils in case we need them. And then we're gonna write a scanner. So scanner s equals new scanner system.in. And recall that in our contest, we're going to be reading in the inputs from the standard input. and printing them in standard output. So that's why we use a scanner here, and that's why we have system in here. So the next thing that we want to do is read in the first line. The first line contains an integer n, which is the number of spaces. So we can actually use something called nextInt. And what this nextInt does is it will find the next integer in your input and read that in. So we can set n to s.nextInt, and that reads in n. So the next thing that we want to do is read in the second line. We can see that the second line is a sequence of n numbers, which defines the board, and the finish is represented by a 0. So in this problem, we're going to be storing that in an array. This array we'll call spaces for convenience equals n. So essentially what this does by placing n inside the int is we create an array of size n or length n. So now what we want to do is loop through the array and pick out every single integer and place it into that array. So we're going to write a for loop starting from 0 and going to n. And we read in this array. So what this does is it takes the ith index starting from 0 and ending at n-1, and it reads in these integers one by one. So before we proceed, let's actually think about how we're going to solve this problem. So how can we find the number of steps it takes to reach 0? And how do we account for this corner case? If it's not possible to reach the finish, then print -1. Well, essentially, there are two ways that we can solve this. The intuitive way is to create a Boolean array. And for each index of the Boolean that we see that we visit, we can set that Boolean array to true. And every other unvisited is false. And once we loop back to the same location, then we can conclude that there's an infinite loop and that we never reach 0. So that's one way to do it. But we want to simplify this problem even further. We want to make this problem run quick. So what we can do instead is notice that in order for there to be a loop, the maximum size of the loop is n, because the maximum length loop that you can achieve is if you loop through every single element. So that means that if your count is less than n and you reach 0 before n turns, then for sure you will be like within a loop. So first we're going to initialize the count to 0. So this is our counter for how many iterations we have. And the next is index. We're going to initialize this index to 0, and then we're going to run a while loop to loop through these. So what do we want to check in our while loop? Well, the very first thing that we want to check is that the count is less than n. Because remember that we mentioned earlier, if the count is greater than n, then that means we definitely are in a loop. So while count less than n, that's the first condition. The second condition is to make sure that the space at the index is not 0. So spaces at index not equal to 0. Now, what do we do here? Well, in this while loop, the very first thing we should do is increment our counter. So we do count ++. And then we want to find the next index that we move to. So to find the next index, we can refer back to our sample problem. So you can see that in this sample input, the very first space is represented by an index 0. The second space is represented by an index 1. And the third space is represented by an index 2. But you can see here that the very first space contains a 2. And that moves us to the second space, like it says in the problem. But that second space is not at the second index. It's actually at the first index. Like the second space here, which is 7, you can see that since this index is 0, the index on 7 must be 1. So what that means is we have to subtract 1 from the index in that space to get to the next index. So we're actually going to make this very clear, we're going to initialize an integer next index, and then we're going to equate this to the index in the space and subtract 1 from it. So from here, we're just going to set index to next index like this. And this should give us our updated index. And if we keep doing this while loop, we should eventually get 2 situations. The first situation is if the counter is greater than or equal to n, then that means we're definitely in a loop. So we want to print -1. So first, let's get that out of the way. If count is greater than or equal to n, then that means that we're inside a loop. So we're going to print -1. Okay, so if we're not in a loop, then the count must be less than n. So we can write an else. And notice that we increment the count every time. And whenever we hit 0, we exit out of the while loop. So all we have to do is print count in this case. So now our program should be complete. Let's test it in the console. So let's copy our sample input. And then let's run this. And you see that this prints 4, which is the correct answer. If you refer back to this problem, our sample output is 4. So this gives us the correct output. And now we're done with our code. So all we have to do is submit the problem. So we've made a few changes to the way that problems are submitted. Instead of copy pasting your code into the email, we want you guys to attach your text file instead, because we feel that that may be easier for both of us. So let's go to email. And then we're going to send the email to teamscodeofficial@gmail.com, like we mentioned in our logs videos. And then in the subject, there's a very particular format that we want you to use. The first element is the division. So let's say that I'm in the advanced division. The second element is your team name. So let's say I have my team name. And the third element is your problem number, including what difficulty it is. So in this case, in this last contest, it was an easy number 4. So I'll write easy number 4 here. And then in the last field, we're going to put our language, which is Java. So for the language, a very specific corner case is if you guys use Python 2 and you're trying to submit solutions, in the language bar, make sure to type Python 2, like with the 2 at the end, so that we know you're using Python 2 and not Python 3. If you use Python 3, then either Python or Python 3 both work. We can grade both of them. But in this case, I'm using Java. So I put Java here, and then all I have to do is attach my file. So my file is here. I choose that, and then all I have to do is send the email, and then there it is. So we've just run through a sample problem and submitted it, and that's exactly how we want you to do that on the contest day. So now we're going to move on to some frequently asked questions. And once we run through those, we'll open up the floor to anyone to ask questions, and we'll be sure to answer all of them.
Great. Thanks, Sean, for going over the problem. Now we're going to go over some frequently asked questions. So first question is, what's the difference between the intermediate and advanced divisions? So there are actually a few differences between the two. For starters, the problems for the advanced division are generally harder than those of the intermediate. However, there's still a fair amount of overlapping problems, so you won't really miss out on too much if you choose either division. Another difference is that the advanced division has a greater prize pool than the intermediate. Specifically, each member of the first place team for the advanced division will get $50. Each member for the second place team will get $25, and third place team gets $15 each. For the intermediate division, first place gets 25, second place gets 15, and third place gets 10.
All right, so is my team allowed to use multiple languages for the contest? Yes, as long as one of those languages is C++, C#, Python, or Java, you're allowed to use multiple languages for the contest. Just specify it in when you register for the contest.
am I allowed to participate if I graduated from high school this year? What if I'm in elementary school? We allow everyone from a rising sixth grader to a graduating senior. So yes, class of 2020 is allowed to participate.
This is a question that came up fairly recently. Is there a data limit, memory limit, and time limit for the programs? So the answer to this is yes, and we recently updated our logistics document to reflect this. The data limit is 50 kilobytes for your files, so make sure that when you're submitting your files, it's less than 50 kilobytes. This should be plenty, as most files are much less than 50 kilobytes. The memory limit is 256 megabytes for the program, so make sure that that's also under that. And the time limit is 3 seconds. Regardless of what language you're using, if your program runs in under 3 seconds, then you will get the correct, you will pass the test case if your answer is correct.
Okay, next question. Am I allowed to search things up during the contest? Since our contest is online, we can't really prevent you guys from searching anything up. So we allow everyone to search anything up on Google or whatever website. So everyone's just on the same ground. For example, you can just search up like Java documentation or like some algorithms that you forgot. It's fine to search things up.
The sample input and output considered one of the 3 test cases? No, they are not considered one of the 3 test cases, and they won't count towards your 3 test cases.
Yeah, so if you have any other questions, feel free to type them in the chat. I already see that a lot of you have asked your questions. So yeah, we'll answer them one by one. The first question is actually, is there a place that we can get questions from previous year's contest? Okay, so this is a great question, and the answer to that is yes. We attach the problem set to every contest page in the bottom once the contest is over. So we'll do that for this contest. But also in Learn, you should have access to previous contest problems in the previous contest problems folder. And you can practice all the problems there. Okay, so the next question is it possible?
We got another question. Yeah, sorry, Sean.
Yeah,
it's,
so
you can go.
Okay, so is it possible to view the question and the solution for the sample question? Wimber, you can answer this.
What was that?
Oh, is it possible to view the question and solution for the sample question?
For the sample question, I'm not quite sure what he's referring to. Is it the one that we just did today? If so, it should, well, for all our previous contests, it's just on our contest page. We release like all the test cases and problems from our 2019 contests.
Yeah, okay, so the next question is, do we need to directly upload our .c++, .java, or .py file? The answer is yes. We do want you to upload as using these extensions instead of .txt because that prevents like any possible formatting issues, or it's just the best way to upload. So be sure that you use these extensions. It's .java for Java, .py for Python, .cpp for C++, and .cs for C#.
Okay, we got another question. If you chose to get matched up with other contestants, when will that be announced? We will be matching up contestants probably by tomorrow, so you guys should look out for an email by Sunday at latest, and it will have all the contact information for your teammates, and it will ask you guys to send us your team name once you decide it, so we can register you all as a group.
Okay, cool. So the next question is, will we be given a limit on how large the data is? The answer to this is yes. We give constraints in all our problems. So it's not stated in this problem, but in our future contests, everything will say like n is less than or equal to 10 to the power of 6 or 10 to the power of 9 or like 10,000. The constraints will all be there for all inputs.
Yeah, so it might be a little bit confusing because there wasn't like constraints on our problem that we did today, but that's just because we didn't put it for last contest, so it wasn't on that problem. But for this one, we've seen that a lot of people are asking for this, so we put constraints for all of the problems this contest.
Someone asked, after submitting the code, do we know the score and how many test cases it successfully run through? Yes, you will. You'll get an email response within a couple of minutes that tells you how many test cases you got correctly.
Also, we'll be sharing with you the spreadsheet containing all the data for all the teams. So like how many test cases you got on a certain problem. We'll be sharing that with you on contest day. So you can refer to that to check how many problems that you got right.
Someone asked, how do team members collaborate during the contest? Should the team meet before the contest and decide who is working on what problems? You can collaborate with your team members however you want. If you want to be on a separate call with them, or if you just want to text them, that is completely fine. If you would like to meet before the contest, that is completely up to you. Someone asked, are you guys going to post the recording anywhere so that we can review this? Yes, this is going onto YouTube after this, after the workshop is over.
I'll post a YouTube link in the Zoom chat.
Okay, so someone earlier asked, yeah, after this meeting, if we have additional questions, who should we contact? This applies for everyone in general. If any questions arise while you're preparing for the contest or like doing practice problems, be sure to email california@teamscode.com and we'll be sure to get back to you as soon as possible.
Someone asked, how many times can you submit? You get 2 submissions per problem.
Oh yeah, just an FYI, the maximum number of times you can submit for a problem is per team and not necessarily per person. So if someone else on your team submits one problem, that's going to be counted as one submission for your team. Another thing is that if you're actually submitting your solution, you must use the emails that you registered your team with. This is for security reasons.
Also, regarding a question someone asked earlier about like, do we get know right away whether we got the problem correct or incorrect? During our live stream, we're going to be having a live scoreboard presented the entire time that will show the top 5 teams. So you'll be able to see your scores updated live if you are one of the top scoring teams.
Yeah, also you'll receive an email reply within 20 seconds of sending in your code, and it'll tell you how many test cases are right, but it's not going to necessarily tell you like what's wrong about it.
Our live stream will be on our YouTube channel. The link is sent into Zoom right now, and we can, yeah, again, this recording of the entire workshop is going onto our YouTube as well. So yeah, you can find the live stream there.
Yeah, we haven't made the live stream link yet, so once you guys register and are on our emailing list, we'll be emailing all the registrants the YouTube link for the live stream.
So someone asked, is there partial credit for problems? To some extent there is, in that we have different test cases. So if you get like say 2 out of 3 test cases, then you get 66% of that problem. But there are no partial credits for test cases. So if your test case is slightly incorrect, meaning like, let's say the first 5 numbers are correct, but the last number is incorrect, then your entire test case is wrong. So the test case has to exactly match that of the given input. There's no partial credit for that.
Someone asked, are you going to email data of the test cases the code fails in the email received after submission? We will tell you how many test cases you got correct out of the 3 total possible, but we won't tell you like what the actual data is for the test case.
Someone asked, do we get the problems during the competition or before? We get them during the competition.
They'll be released at 1:30 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. So yeah, the tiny URL will actually be posted on the live stream and in the chat. So be sure to look out for that.
Yeah. 罗鹏问我们晚上还去他们去 Google 附近开会，就我们还去吗？我们不去了吧？
我不知道是什么 Google 附近。
啊，那行，那就不去了。是不是在 Google 附近？找个地方接着看。
嗯，好。
Okay, so someone asked, what happened after the 2 submissions? The 3rd submission will be ignored or override the first 2 test scores. So yeah,
it gets
the 3rd
ignored.
submission. Yeah, Victor, you can go.
Yeah, it gets ignored. You'll get a reply within 20 seconds that says you have exceeded your submission limit. Also, Fred is asking, can all members submit code for several problems in parallel? Yes, they can. Yep, the problems are queued, by the way, so it's going to like be grading one problem at a time, and it's going to move on to the next one and stuff. Yep. Oh yeah, and will team members be matched based on experience? You may pick who to put on your team, but if you want to join a random team, it's not necessarily based on experience, it's based on the contest division.
Yeah, she's referring to more of the place where we're like matching people together if they marked yes on our form for being matched with a random team. Right now, we don't really have a method for doing that. We're basically just matching the people who signed up first together so that they can start communicating to each other. So there's no like experience-based matching.
And to what Daniel said, you can make your own teams. The team members to be matched with your experience question was specifically referring to if you don't have a team and you're willing to be matched up with other contestants. But yeah, if you have a team, you don't actually have to worry about that. So for Roy's question, you can paste your code as long as the code is not in Python, because with Python, the indentation may cause errors in when we grade it. So that's why we expect people who use Python to use files. But one solution for this is if you do not have a platform for it, yeah, you can copy the file into TextEdit, which both Mac and Windows have, and you just save it as anything and then .py if you're using Python. If you're not using Python, you don't have to worry about that.
James asks if you already have a team, does everyone in the team need to submit a form? You don't have to submit a form individually. It's one person on the team submits for everyone.
What does our file have to be called?
You can call it whatever you want. If you're submitting it as an email attachment, the only thing is that if it's like if it's a Java file, it must be a .java file. If it's like a Python file, it must be .py, and if it's C, it must be .c or .cpp. And if it's C#, it must be .cs. The attachment must be correct. If you're submitting a Java file, it would be nice if you set the file name to the name of the public class inside that file.
Yeah. If you're not using Java, you don't actually have to worry about what you name the problems. They'll still be graded according to what you put in the subject bar. So I'm going to quickly go back to a previous question that was asked like earlier, just to be like very clear on it. Someone asked like, or actually multiple people asked if you're allowed to use an outdated version of the language. from my understanding, it does not matter unless you're using Python. So the only distinction is if you're using Python 2 versus Python 3. For other languages, like the version of the language is not critical to grading it.
Yeah, another thing is that if you're using C++ as a programming language, do keep in mind that our compiler has been set to use the C++ 11 standard. So if you use anything that's not included in the C++ 11 standard, it might not get compiled properly.
Someone asked, should all team members use the same email account for submitting solutions? No, you don't have to. As long as the email you're submitting solutions from is from someone in the team, it's completely fine. You can have different people in the team submit for different problems from their own emails.
Correct, but the only thing is that that email must be in the registration list. So like whatever emails you registered your team in, you must use that set of emails. This is to prevent cheating, of course.
The higher score from the 2 submissions will be counted for final score average. It will be the higher score, not the average. So like if you get 1 out of 3 for the first submission and 3 out of 3, it won't be considered 2 out of 3. It would be considered 3 out of 3. Where do we email the code? Yes, Daniel responded correctly. TeamsCodeofficial@gmail.com. Okay, Howard asks, after the contest, will there be anyone reviewing problems? We're considering also holding another workshop, going over some of the more difficult or like questions that people had questions about. So you guys should look out for that workshop when it comes time.
But for sure, we're going to be sending out the solutions to all the problems, so you guys can take a look at that. Hopefully that helps.
If you have any questions in general, you can just email california@teamscode.com and then we'll be sure to answer it. Like it doesn't really, as long as it's related to the contest, we can answer your questions. Okay, so Mihir asked, did you send a confirmation email for registration? No, we didn't send a confirmation email for registration, but if you aren't sure if you registered or not, you can actually submit your form again. Just only do it like if you really are not sure if you submitted.
A better way would actually just be emailing us your name and email and just asking for us to check on the registration form so we don't have to delete the previous one. Okay, another question is approximately how many teams will be competing? I'd say almost 100 teams have signed up right now.
108 total.
Yeah, so we have 108 teams.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty evenly divided between the advanced and intermediate divisions right now.
Actually, sorry, with regards to the confirmation question, actually, we'll be sending like a confirmation email later on. So maybe like tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, we'll be sending emails saying, thank you so much for signing up for this contest. So that way you'll know whether you're signed up or not. Yes, Max asked, what is the format for the subject of the email? It's difficulty, team name, problem number, and programming language. For example, advanced, team foobar, easy number 1, Java. Also, by the way, if you guys have any questions during the actual live stream, for the first 30 minutes from 1 to 1:30, we'll be giving out an introduction speech and just reviewing the rules over quickly. And then from 1:30 to 4:30 is your time to work on problems, right? But we'll be hanging around the live stream so you guys can ask us questions in the YouTube chat, and we'll be checking that digitally and being able to respond to everybody's questions.
With regard to the problem or the submission format, be sure that the problem number is the number and not the problem name. So make sure that it does not contain the problem name, or that specifically you have the number, because that's a very easy thing to get confused about. To Mihir's question, will you send out the email information in a document? Right now, we actually have a document with all the logistics, which is basically like everything you need to know for the contest. And we linked it earlier, but we can link it again when the contest day approaches. And when you're going through the problems, you can just refer to that logistics document if you have like any questions or concerns.
In addition, if you guys prefer the logistics in video format, we have a logistics video, and I can send that. So, yeah. So Wimbert sent a link to the logistics document, which is everything in text form. So you can just reference that whenever you need to, or you can watch this video that's on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, the video, the information is a little bit outdated. There are a few differences or changes that we implemented. The first change is instead of copy pasting your code, we want you to submit your code as a file to prevent like the Python formatting issues. The second thing is the prizes have changed. So previously we said that we were only raffling off and 2 Amazon Echo Dots and Nintendo Switch and Bluetooth headphones, but now we've added a Fitbit Charge 3, RGB gaming mouse, a pen tablet, and also Anchor Bluetooth speakers. So those are additional prizes for our prize pool that are not mentioned in the logistics video.
Okay, one more time, since people may have joined late, if you want the extra raffle ticket for attending this workshop, you want to change your name to your first and last name instead of just your first name, so we can get you down on our raffle ticket form.
Make sure that the name that you enter into your Zoom is exactly the name that you entered when you signed up, because that way we can verify that it's you. Okay, so Audrey asked a question: are you only showing the top 5 scores? So we're actually we're showing the top 5 scores for each division, yeah. So only the top 5 scores, but we will also be sending a spreadsheet containing information for all teams. So if you want to see your score, you can refer to that spreadsheet on contest day.
Yeah, and that spreadsheet is updated live. So like as soon as like you get your problem graded, you'll see the update on there.
Nathan asks, will you be live streaming on the YouTube account you used to post the logistics video? Yes, we will. And we will be sending out the live stream link a couple days before the event. Sorry, just going back to the top 5 scores question. So on our live stream, we'll only be displaying the top 5 scores in a graph, but we'll also be sharing a spreadsheet with you that updates live everybody's scores. And you can view that anytime you want, but it just won't be on the live stream itself. So.
So we'll give around 2 more minutes for questions. If you have any questions, be sure to ask them in the next 2 minutes. And after that, we'll be ending this workshop. The workshop will be posted on our YouTube. So if you missed anything or you could not attend the workshop, then we will be posting that there.
Okay, just in case anyone has not yet signed up for our online contest on the 25th, I'll send the link, the registration form link to the chat. Make sure you guys sign up because signups end on the 23rd, so you guys need to sign up quickly.
Yeah, so if you make errors, you can do two things. You can email us at california@teamscode.com and we'll fix the error, or you can just fill in the registration form again. And if in the question section you say that, oh, I made an error in the first time like I signed up, then we'll be sure to delete that submission and keep the second one. So you don't really have to worry about or like be careful, but if you make any errors, email us or resubmit.
If there are no final questions, then we'll be ending this workshop at 2:15. So
Yeah, again, if you guys haven't signed up for the contest, you can do so now at tinyurl.com/tcsummer2020. If you still have any further questions after the workshop, you are always welcome to email us at california@teamscode.com. And lastly, this entire workshop will be posted onto YouTube if you would like to refer back to it, or if someone was unable to make it.